Right. Okay. Again, what Daryl says in the interview is, look, I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but I look at Churchill as the true villain, and he didn't kill the most people. He isn't directly responsible for the most atrocities, but here's why. And so,
this isn't a real conversation. I'm noticing this so much more, and it just kills my this isn't a real conversation right now. This is stupid. This is dumb. Misspeaking might mean that you get a minor date wrong, or maybe you swap a name or you mispronounce something or whatever. But it's pretty clear what the principal thesis is of the conversation that he had with Tucker Carlson. Whether or not he was being hyperbolic in one term or not is missing the trees for the forest, or the forest for the trees. It's pretty obvious that underpinning all of this is that Britain was somehow the main responsible party that drew us into World War II, and that Hitler was desperate for peace with the West. Even in the bit I listened to, it's highly unlikely that there's going to be more context that changes that, unless by the end of that conversation he's literally okay, and so that's what I would say if I was a complete and total crazy person trying to do a historical revising of World War II. But here's what actually happened, right? Why is Dave Smith the slimy fuck that should be the... Oh, why is he a slimy fuck? I don't know. He either enjoys being a contrarian, he likes taking the opposite position against the woke mob and the losers or something, he perceives to be the woke mob, or he's... I don't know anymore. I don't understand the minds of people like this. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think the thing that would give me the most insight into people like this is I'm curious what they do with their free time. What do you do all day when you're not on programs like this, just spouting the most ridiculous historical nonsense ever? What are you doing in your free time?
So again, I would just say it's not as if Daryl Cooper is walking back what he said there, but if you go listen to the follow-up piece he put out, he's explaining where he's coming from.
No, but Dave, do you personally think that Churchill was the real villain then?
Oh no, I'm trying to convince people that it was all Woodrow Wilson's fault. I'm not trying to put the blame on Churchill here, just to be clear. No, I mean, look, I think that the greatest villains of the 20th century, there's an overwhelming case that the top three would be Hitler, Stalin, and Mao.
Right.
However,
how do they rationalize the idea that Germany wanted peace with the West when they turned on Russia, who was their ally at one point? I mean, these events, remember, in real life, right, people don't live by quotes. And in real life, you don't figure out what happened based on one sentence. My guess is going to be, for World War II, there were probably a ton of competing motivations and considerations and facts for every side. It wouldn't surprise me if, and again, I haven't done a deep dive into World War II, but it wouldn't surprise me if Hitler simultaneously wanted peace with the West because he thought he could just hold all of mainland Europe, or he thought he could hold Poland and then do more invasions later, or he thought that the Russians were going to backstab him, so he wanted to invade the Soviet Union first, or he just thought that he could beat the Soviet Union and take land from them, or all of these things. And it's not even there's probably not even one answer, because there wasn't for a lot of the Israeli-Palestinian wars. It's probably competing multiple motivations that are pushing and pulling people in different directions at every point in time, is my guess, right? And to boil it down to one statement or one sentence or one thing is usually reductionist to the point of you're just trying to serve a particular narrative or propaganda piece, usually.
There's an overwhelming case that the top three would be Hitler, Stalin, and Mao.
Right.
However, oh no, I'm trying to convince people that it was all Woodrow Wilson's fault. I'm not trying to put the blame on Churchill here, just to be fair. No, I mean, look, I think that the greatest villains of the 20th century, there's an overwhelming case that the top three would be Hitler, Stalin, and Mao.
Right.
However, I think that in terms of who did the most evil. However, the question that I think is a fairly important one to ask is, were there blunders and were there atrocities committed on other sides of that war, or on the other side of that war? And I think that World War II is objectively kind of the worst thing that ever happened in human history. And I think that 80 years later, we should be able to kind of have some of these discussions about what mistakes were made. Did it need to go as bad as it went? Look, I'm not saying a lot of these...
people like Dave know very little, but they think they know a lot and special. Yeah, the thing that drives me the craziest about people like this is Dave is exactly what people accuse me of being. Where Dave does know an impressive amount of discrete facts, but I can especially tell when I've listened to him talk about Israel and Palestine, wow, you actually know a surprising amount of discrete facts that I wouldn't expect somebody to know, but your connection of them is so incorrect. It's very obvious that you've just heard somebody else say these things and now you're repeating them, but you don't know how any of these things connect. Dave Smith is what people accuse me of being, which is very frustrating. Because Dave does not have, I don't think, he's probably never read a single book in his life on any of these conflicts, or done any more exploring than just a Twitter thread or a blog post or whatever, which, by the way, is also fine. You don't necessarily need to read the books to have all the information, but for some reason, this guy, I blame Joe Rogan, is presented as the expert on all of these issues when his subject matter expertise is, I don't even want to say service level because it's not true, it's just wrong. Because oftentimes it's rooted in libertarian conspiratorial nonsense. Dave Smith is always going to give you the take that all wars are bad, anything that's not libertarian principles is bad. Basically, that's always going to be his take. It'll always line up with that more or less.
Kind of the worst thing that ever happened in human history. And I think that 80 years later, we should be able to kind of have some of these discussions about what mistakes were made. Did it need to go as bad as it went? Look, I'm not saying a lot of these claims rely on counterfactuals that are not falsifiable. They're not provable. We don't know if the Nazis had been put down when they first started reconstituting their military. Perhaps that would have made things go way better than they ultimately went. At the same time, I think there's a very, very strong argument that handing a war guarantee to Poland was a blunder of enormous proportion that took the war power ability out of Britain and handed it to these Polish colonels, all in the name of defending Poland, which ultimately got destroyed in the war and then got handed to Joseph Stalin for many decades after that. So I think there's a real interesting question of history there.
All right, I'm going to bring...
Is he saying the Poles instigated the Germans invading them, or I don't...
Stephen, in one moment, I just saw you furiously shaking your head, Andrew. So, on that point.
First of all, on that point, Winston Churchill wasn't even in the cabinet in April 1939 when that guarantee to Poland...
Was that guarantee, as Dave says, was that a mistake?
No, because after the Rhineland, after Anschluss, after the Sudetenland, you had to have a tripwire to actually go into war with them.
Okay, let me bring in Seth.
Okay,
okay, Dave, respond to that. That's okay.
Well, look, nobody, including me or Darryl Cooper, was claiming that Winston Churchill was the one who made that call. It's just a question of, look, the outcome of making that call was about as bad as it possibly could have been.
Because of Adolf Hitler.
Well, sure. No, nobody is arguing, including Darryl. Nobody's arguing Adolf Hitler.
You should let the historian go back and forth with him more. Why is Pierce doing it? Connect those two. Let them go back and forth for just like 5 minutes, please.
Doesn't have responsibility for the Second World War. The question is, this is almost like on the level, if I were to say that that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were the great villains of the war in Iraq, that's not an endorsement of Saddam Hussein. That's not to suggest that he wasn't a brutal dictator. It's just to say, was this the right decision? Did this make things much worse, or did it make things better? In the case of World War II...
Yeah, but Bush and Cheney, but Bush instigated the war in Iraq, right? So the comparison doesn't work unless, in your mind, you're trying to say that Churchill did instigate the U.S., I guess, and Britain going into World War II. It's not. That's a really bad comparison, or it's a really good one. It shows that your understanding is just so stupid.
This the right decision? Did this make things much worse, or did it make things better? In the case of World War II, we don't know what all of the potential outcomes could have been. It's pretty hard to envision a worse outcome.
You know the difference? You know what? I actually would say
it's pretty hard to envision a worse outcome than what happened in World War II? I mean, you mean just for Poland getting split, or just because I think we can envision a lot of worse outcomes for World War II. Like, what do you mean?
What all of the potential outcomes could have been. It's pretty hard to envision a worse outcome.
You know the difference? You know what? I actually would say there's a very good argument for saying that Bush and Cheney were the chief villains of that Iraq war. It was illegal. It was nonsensical. It caused utter mayhem. It wasn't even successful, really, in terms of the immediate aftermath onwards. But to try and equate the Iraq war, which was a war fought against Saddam Hussein's Iraq based on a...
Also, remember, yeah, true, Pierre's about to say it. For people, for a lot of modern commentators, I guess, when they're talking American foreign policy in alternative media, the only event that has happened in U.S. history when it comes to wars is like Iraq and Vietnam, which are the exact same thing. And then Afghanistan could get tossed in there. And like, that's it. All of our foreign policy is based around the failures in Iraq, and every new war and every war we've ever been in. All of it is like Iraq. That's it. That's it.
Quickly.
But to try and equate the Iraq war, which was a war fought against Saddam Hussein's Iraq based on a completely false premise that he had weapons of mass destruction, with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis and their ideological global campaign to eradicate anyone they didn't like, which led to 12 million people being murdered, including 6 million Jews in gas chambers. I don't think there's any comparison.
People are trying to say that this is just criticism of Churchill, and that criticism of Churchill is not Hitler apologism or endorsement of Hitler or something like that, or downplaying. But the two are actually linked together. You can't vilify Churchill as the chief villain, whether it's hyperbolic or not, of World War II without ignoring or downplaying Hitler's own aggression.
The time has come.
Yeah, I think I might agree with him in principle, but man, you got to be careful, because it's not zero sum. None of these events are. Like, you can have multiple parties at fault. It's possible to say that somebody made mistakes without necessarily taking from the other side. I don't think I would disagree with this guy in principle, but in opposition to him here, I don't know if this would be the line of argumentation I go down.
His own intentions, his own statements, the actions he had already taken up to that point. You can't accomplish that vilification without downplaying those things. So whether he specifically goes out there and explicitly says, you know what, I'm kind of a fan of Hitler, he doesn't have to if he's still engaging in that kind of sympathetic downplaying of some of the things that Hitler had said and done.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It's not really so much him saying, like, the problem isn't saying that Churchill wanted war, Churchill wanted to fight, or any of these things. Like, that's not the issue. The issue is saying that Hitler really wanted peace, right? As an example, in '67 for the Six-Day War, you know, the idea that Israel didn't want to fight or they didn't want to take more territory, of course they did. Given the opportunity to, absolutely. But it's not zero sum. It doesn't mean that the Arabs weren't also pushing for a sort of conflict as well, right? Both sides can be in the wrong in different ways, and you're not necessarily giving more credibility to one side or taking credibility from their side and doing it. You can analyze these things through multiple dimensions. But the problem isn't that guy saying that Churchill might have done bad things. The problem is him downplaying what the Nazis did, or saying things like Hitler just wanted peace. They just didn't know what to do with all the Soviets. That's the issue, not the Churchill stuff, but the Hitler stuff.
Done. And then if you also go and look at, the excuse that he's not a Hitler apologist, he's got this 30-hour-long podcast or whatever you should go listen to. I don't really have.
What is the point of this shit? This discourse just appeared out of nowhere, and nobody thought this or cared about this until that retarded Tucker Carlson episode. It feels like this shit is fabricated. Candace Owens has been doing the Nazi apologia shit for years now, actually. She engages in a lot of it. A lot of the far right is susceptible to this since they no longer believe in literally anything. Like, anybody could literally spin any story they wanted to out of thin air. Like, the far right conspiracy theories, they aren't even good anymore. They're not even interesting. Like, at least JFK is, like, plausible. But, like, all of the far right conspiracies now are just, like, boring and stupid. Like, the U.S. government is locking us all down because they want to fucking... Like, at least the Iraq conspiracies make sense. The United States went to war with Iraq because they wanted to steal all their fucking oil. Okay, sure. Probably not the best support for it, but it makes sense. Yeah, you want your countries to do it. The U.S. government locked us all down so that they could destroy our fucking economy and force us all to take the poisonous fact. Why would you want to do that to your own country? Wait, what? If you were the corrupt leader of why the fuck would you destroy your own country? Wouldn't you want to make everybody else lock down and then keep your own shit open? Why would you do that? Like, the conspiracies don't even make sense anymore. They assume that, like, all of the shadow cabal leaders are on this, like, suicide death march into the future where they just want to destroy everything that they can get their hands on. It's like, why? What? It's just fucking stupid. It's boring and stupid and cringe.
Or apologist, he's got this 30-hour-long podcast or whatever you should go listen to. I don't really have time for that, but I have looked at his Twitter. I have looked at his posts. He's described himself as a fascist. He puts up side-by-side photos of...
At least debating this is so obviously stupid and people on one side are so easily dismantled. Yeah, but they don't debate. These people don't ever go to debates anywhere, right? They just, they just stay in their little media circles. They gain... And also, these same conspiracies will reemerge over and over and over again. Look at that one, is it Leo Frank? The ADL case or whatever, like, this conspiracy will come back over and over again, that this Jewish guy tried to frame this poor black dude, and the ADL rose up to defend a pedophile or whatever. Like,
of Hitler after having invaded France, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower with his Nazi soldiers next to him, and he puts that side by side with the drag display that happened at the Paris Olympics, and he says what happened in France under Hitler with that invasion was infinitely preferable to what just happened at the Paris Olympics. Hitler went into France, invaded, was there occupying for years, and sent all the Jews to ovens to be burned and killed. I mean, like, to suggest that that's infinitely preferable to an offensive display at the Olympics is wild. It's outrageous. And so, and it goes to a number of his other tweets. You can go really deep in there. He describes himself as a fascist. He posts these things about Hitler, and they're usually pretty sympathetic to Hitler. Over and over and over again, they're sympathetic. He said that this was, I think Dave said this too, the worst possible outcome was the Allies winning this war. I mean, that's completely outrageous.
Yeah, and Seth, you've got into...
That's not what I said.
Clarify what you said.
That's what he said. I'm quoting him.
That's what Cooper said. Daryl Cooper.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said that was...
But that's just a minor disagreement. That's just a minor disagreement, though, that Dave would have with him. That's just a little thing that he thinks he got incorrect. A small, minor thing.
Is what I said. No, what I
it
said...
sounded like you said...
That,
it sounded like you echoed him, that this is the worst possible outcome. That's what I heard you say. If that's wrong...
No, what I'm saying is that the biggest bloodbath in human history, where I think something like 25 to 30 million civilians were killed, of course, the Holocaust, the raping of Stalin's army all the way through Europe, the absolute destruction of Europe, and not just Europe, Japan and Africa and all, I think that is a pretty bad outcome. I'm not saying that I wish the Nazis had won. And just a couple points on this. Number one, just to your point, Piers, I was not equating the war in Iraq to World War II. I'm just talking, it was a logical analogy. I'm just saying the logic of saying that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were the villains does not mean that you therefore support Saddam Hussein.
No, I understood that,
as far as,
yeah.
But the logic doesn't work. It's illogical because it's disanalogous, right? Saying that the reason why it doesn't work is because the comparison doesn't work. Because he tried to say that if you criticize Bush and Cheney as being the chief villains of Iraq, the Iraq War, that doesn't mean you're exonerating Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein didn't start the Iraq War, right? If you say that Churchill or Wilson or whatever the fuck were the chief villains, leading into World War II or starting World War II or being in World War II, then and Hitler was probably the one that started it. It's disanalogous. The comparison doesn't work here. Right?
the logic of that. That's all. So I agree with you.
My question.
You have never looked into the Leo Frank case. You parrot your Zog talking points. I have enough. I feel pretty confident about it, but okay.
For you, Dave,
But Seth's logic also does not follow.
No, I understand, but Dave,
Oh, what was his point of bringing up Wilson? Or does he blame Wilson for World War I? Or why the fuck does he?
Command me. At last.
I don't know why he brought up Wilson earlier. I have no clue.
question for you would be, how would you have tackled Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, given their ideology, given their military might, given their intent was declared very clearly?
What is Zog? Probably some anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic talking point.
Tackled Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, given their ideology, given their military might, given their intent was declared very clearly with the invasion of Poland. What would you have done?
I'd have said, knock it off, in a real aggressive voice. I'd say, you knock it off,
Exactly.
you Nazis.
But this is the reality. The world was facing a genuinely
I know.
existential threat.
My blade.
Oh yeah, no, there's no question about that. No, look, my real, as I said before, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I kind of mean it too. My real dog in this fight is to blame Woodrow Wilson. I think that the mistake was getting involved in World War I. I think that World War I was looking like it was headed toward a stalemate. America got involved and then forced the unconditional surrender of the Germans.
I haven't done my research on World War I yet, but my guess is everything you're saying is probably bullshit. But I just haven't dug into it enough to say so.
Posed the Treaty of Versailles. I think that's kind of what set the table for World War II ultimately to happen. Look, what happened in World War II happened. I don't know how things would be different if things had...
He also has no answer, by the way. I wonder if Piers is going to force him to answer that, or if Piers is just gentler on the Nazi apologia. Like, make him answer. So what would you have done for World War II?
Huh?
I said some people did some things.
Sure, okay. Listen, all I'm saying is that the logic of saying that if you're critical of Winston Churchill, or if you're critical of FDR, or if you're critical of Joseph Stalin, I suppose, also would be... Well, but I'm just saying, the logic that...
I mean, Piers needs to bring up, what about him saying that the death camps were just a result of them not, like running out of food? They were mercy killings. Do you think... You should ask him that. Do you think he was correct in saying the death camps were mercy killings?
Or means you're downplaying Hitler. It just simply does not follow.
Well, actually, I don't agree with you, because if you actually say, as a statement of fact, that the chief villain of the Second World War is Winston Churchill, and you don't say it was Hitler, then I'm afraid what you are doing, as Seth said earlier, what you are doing, Dave, you are downplaying just how evil Hitler was, because you're saying that this other guy...
Like, he's focused on just this one chief villain comment, and he should be focused on the downplaying comments.
Defended as
Let me get a word in here, because there's also the issue of what's not being said, because you can suggest well, did he actually say anything that was sympathetic to Hitler? Well, some of it was what he didn't say. In that conversation, there was no mention of the Holocaust. There was no mention of Hitler's genocidal intentions in a conversation that was meant to determine who the chief villain of World War II was. No mention of those things. How's that justifiable?
Well, I mean, Seth, I just want everybody who's watching this to just appreciate for a moment.
Is he going to bring up how we always have to talk about the Holocaust? Is that where we're going with this? Or...
that I'm sitting here and saying, hey, listen, this guy spent a half hour of this long podcast series that he did covering the Holocaust. He just put out around a half hour kind of statement about all the controversy of the last 2 weeks. Everybody on the show here has not listened to it. And then Seth goes, yeah, I'm not going to listen to all of that, but I will find these obscure tweets. So all I'm saying is that if you want to listen to this guy talking about the horrors of the Holocaust, he is out there on record.
That wasn't the question. The question is, if you're talking about who the chief villain of World War II is, it's weird not to bring up like probably like the most coordinated, systematic genocide in human history. It seems weird not to bring that up. It's great if you've covered it elsewhere, but...
Listen to it and tell me if this sounds like a guy who's downplaying the Holocaust.
Dave, hang on.
Also, no one's listening to a 30-hour fucking podcast. Like, what an unreasonable standard. Jesus Christ.
How long was this interview with Tucker Carlson? It was like 2 hours.
2 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So in 2 hours, you don't get into the Holocaust as you're trying to pick Winston Churchill as the real villain of the war? I mean, come on.
I think
true.
I think that's a reasonable critique, and that, yeah, I wish Tucker had asked him a little bit more of that, and I wish he had gotten into some of the stuff he got on this other 30-minute explanation
I think
of it that I was
tweets are a
talking
reasonable
about.
critique too. Do you agree with his tweets that are sympathetic to Hitler and calling himself a fascist?
Yeah, I would. I wouldn't agree with those tweets. I didn't post them. I also don't really believe, like, if you could imagine, so like as somebody who has consumed hours and hours and hours of his content, I'm not like hanging him over one tweet that he said that I think was like, yeah.
Like, here's the issue that I have too, okay? This is also the issue that I have, all right? If he was like this with everybody, then I'd be like, okay, he's boring, he's dumb, whatever the fuck. But the issue is that you'll find like one tweet from a guy who's like pro BLM and will crucify the fuck out of him for that particular thing. But then when it comes to this guy who just says, he's like, well, I don't know about this, or I don't know about that. Oh, I understand, I disagree with all that. But you find some guy who's like, yeah, like, I support George Floyd. It's like, really? Don't you know that he died of a... Like, these people will take one... They act like they're so skeptical, or they're so charitable, only selectively, though. Only when it comes to one side. This is one of the things that triggered me with Peterson, where when you ask Peterson, did the Jews really escape from, Egyptian slavery? Did the Jews actually, cross the Sea of Reeds or the Red Sea and go to Israel? And did that actually happen? Like, Peterson will ramble for 45 minutes before saying he can even give you an answer. He has no idea. I can't, can you be concrete about any particular thing? Who knows what's happened? Like, what does that actually mean? But then when you ask him a question about, like, COVID or vaccines or whatever the fuck else, he has, like, the most solid, firm fucking answers in the world. And I know some people are going to say, well, that's because it's religious, but no, it's not. When Alex O'Connor was asking the question, it was a historical question. But Peterson will become infinitely skeptical of even language when it comes to asking questions that he knows that if he takes a firm position on, it doesn't help his side. But as soon as it's on the other side, all the skepticism disappears, and now we become the most one-dimensional, full of conviction people on Earth when it comes to talking about things. It's so stupid.
Again, being very hyperbolic, and I don't think was really landed. But I will say this, if anybody is interested in hearing more from Daryl Cooper or getting to know why I do consider him to be a national treasure, I'm having an interview with him the day after tomorrow on my show, Part of the Problem. I think that the caricature that's being painted of him is not really indicative of who he is, and not indicative of why it is that we find him to be such a bad
You might ironically be part of the problem, Dave Smith. I want to come to Seth, because you got into it with Tucker Carlson in private text messages over this interview. What was that about?
Well, he came at me because I had mocked his response to Cooper in this interview, right? There was a lot of criticism being published in the media about Cooper's views in particular, and then Tucker, just nodding along and agreeing. Tucker praised this guy as like the greatest historian and scholar, that he's ever heard from. And this is the guy you got to listen to. He's the authority on this. And then gave him a very...
On the Bridgers episode we did with the archaeologist Flint, is it Flint Russell? Is that his last name? He brings up this concept a lot. Actually, wait, I don't think this comes up until our... No, wait. Flint Dibble. Not Russell. Flint Dibble. He brings up this concept. I think it's in our second episode. The idea of forbidden knowledge is so cringe that if you have 100 people, 100 educated people telling you one thing, and then one guy comes out with this crazy take out of left field, now that guy is like, oh my God, this is the forbidden knowledge that they don't want us to know about. They don't want us to know this forbidden. It's like, no, the guy's probably just wrong or retarded. Like, what are you talking about, bro? And also keep in mind, all this over a guy who doesn't even have any background in history. He's just a guy that's read probably some shit on Twitter. Like,
very soft interview. We didn't push back on any of this stuff. Tucker didn't bring up the Holocaust, so it was very soft. And
there's another episode with Dibble. Yeah, we do one with Milo and Dibble together.
And then gave him a very soft interview. We didn't push back on any of this stuff. Tucker didn't bring up the Holocaust, so it was very soft. And I mocked that, and he got kind of upset about that and reached out to me to basically accuse me of, not basically, but literally accuse me of slandering him as a Nazi. And like, I never called you a Nazi. I just said you went soft on a Hitler apologist. That's all that I said. And then he tried to he made a statement on Charlie Kirk's show, which was not accurate. It wasn't true, suggesting that I had come at him privately to denounce the fact that he had platformed this person. And I never did that. All I did was explain that if you're going to platform this person and not push back on them, then why would you be surprised by the backlash that you get? Because he's saying some outrageous things, and you're basically agreeing with it and going along with it. So I did not suggest that he should have been platformed. In fact, my opinion on this is one that is a very strong free speech position. These kinds of voices should be heard. We need to get these ideas out there and discuss them, and they should be refuted or they can be ridiculed. I don't advocate for censorship. I never suggested that Tucker shouldn't have platformed Cooper in the first place. I think Cooper should do all the interviews possible, and let's hear his ideas and let's respond to them. And the bigger point, because Tucker tried to suggest that I was encouraging censorship and that these people who are pushing back are encouraging censorship. No, the responses to Cooper's claims, the responses have primarily been focused on Cooper's claims and Tucker's handling of Cooper's claims, and that is a contribution to the discussion, not an attempt to end the discussion. The responses that are happening, the objections that they're receiving, are not an effort to silence anyone or deplatform anyone or end the discussion. It's part of the discussion. So to act like, oh, I'm being censored or oh, I'm being canceled because there's a backlash.
This too. There were cancel memes, especially from like 2013 to 2020, I guess, where the progressives legitimately were crazy about cancel culture. But now there's like CDS or CCDS, cancel culture derangement syndrome, where somebody will give an interview with some guy who's like, yeah, I think Hitler actually had the biggest cock of all time, and I think he probably gave it real good. Those huge back shots coming from Hitler, okay? And then somebody's like, I don't actually think Hitler had a huge dick. In fact, I don't think you have any proof of that whatsoever. And then they're like, excuse me, are you trying to cancel me? Excuse me, canceling? Are you canceling me right now? You disagreed with me? That's basically cancel culture. Right? What is cancel culture about? Like, hey, maybe if a guy comes on and he's going to talk about how, Hitler, had the highest jump shot of all time, the best 52-inch vertical leap, whatever the fuck. Maybe you should push back against that. Huh. Well, that sounds like cancel culture. Okay.
It's a tactic. It's a playbook now that they're using, where these people on the right will come out with these provocative statements. They'll generate some backlash or some objections, and then they'll say, oh, look, the objections mean I'm being canceled, or that this is a forbidden topic, or that there must be some truth here, because look at how...
Who is this guy? Is this guy a conservative? Who is this guy? Yes. Correct. I don't know who this guy is, but whoever he is, amen, brother.
And then they'll say, oh, look, the objections mean I'm being canceled, or that this is a forbidden topic, or that there must be some truth here because look at how hysterical they are. Well, some people just care about the truth and want to discuss it, and they're contributing to that conversation.
Yes.
That's it.
Let me bring Andrew back in here. He said several things about historians and the way that
He's
they...
the owner of the Babylon Bee? Oof. Yikes. So I'm super primed to hate this guy. But that is true. What he just said was very true.
been using stuff about World War II.
You're going to have taboos. You're going to have certain ways that certain topics have to be talked about that are going to guarantee that topic is just profoundly misunderstood. Like, we're going to get to a point where the interwar period and the Second World War are far enough away that people can actually start taking a more honest look at everything that went on. And it is going to be the...
Why? Isn't the Babylon Bee like the super anti-woke Twitter thing? Their stuff is generally decently funny. They just tend to take shots at only one side. They do take shots at the other side, though. And their audience gets very mad when they do it. But yeah, it's like the Onion for conservatives. It's not the worst thing in the world, I guess.
The most fruitful place that any aspiring historian can dive into, because we spent the last 70 years, I mean, in Europe's case, like literally throwing people in jail for looking into the wrong corners. Then whenever that's the case, actually start taking a more honest look at everything that went on. And it is going to be the most fruitful place that any aspiring historian can dive into, because we spent the last 70 years, I mean, in Europe's case, like literally throwing people in jail for looking into the wrong corners. Then whenever that's the case, when you try to add any type of balance to that account, it's going to look like you're trying to justify those other things.
Andrew, your response to that?
Well, in a way, of course, he's right. The more likely one sees, the more documents you go to, the more archives that you work in, the better it should be if you're approaching it from an objective way. But remarks such as you made earlier about Zionist financiers bribing Winston Churchill, there just is no evidence for this at all, and also shows a profound misunderstanding of the kind of person that Winston Churchill was. So I'm afraid I do say, yes, of course, with free speech, everybody should be able to say something. But why Mr. Carlson chose this this really very, very low-rate historian to interview at such length over such...
Not even, I don't think he even is a historian, right? He's a podcaster, dude.
Issues seems bizarre to me.
Well, Dave Smith, if, and I absolutely, by the way, would bow to Andrew's historical knowledge on this particular subject matter, things you could, any other human being alive, and certainly not a man given to hyperbole. If you take what Andrew says at face value, going through point by point by point by point by point, and it turns out that pretty much everything Daryl Cooper said in terms of his argument was based on a false reading of facts. Does that change your view of this national...
Have I been on stage with this guy before? Maybe, probably, somewhere like that.
treasure?
Well, wait, so if everything he's saying is wrong, would that change? Okay, sure. Yeah, I suppose it would. Listen, he hasn't even, they were discussing a big piece that he's about to put out about World War II. It hasn't even been put out yet.
Right.
So certainly...
He's already made claims, bro. Like, where is this charitability when it comes to any other side? Like, did he talk at all about Kamala Harris's price gouging thing before she published a detailed plan? Like, does he have tweets super hardcore going in on, like, a statement that she's made? I don't actually know. Like, where is the charitability? Oh, Dave, this is not him. Comic Dave Smith. One day I'll learn how to use the Twitter advanced search better.
When this does come out, my attitude isn't like it should be taken as gospel. I think that, sure, then it should start a conversation. If he's getting things wrong, I think...
It shouldn't start a conversation, though. This is the issue. God, it's so stupid. There's only so much time in the day to discuss things, Dave. There's only so many, like, articles that can be read. There are only so many headlines that can be run. And the idea that all of this is just going to be flooded by people that don't even do a basic amount of research before they start making claims, and now it's a valid discussion. It's not. It's a waste of everybody's fucking time.
I think people should criticize him for that, and then we should all look into it. Look, his series on the creation of the State of Israel, it's basically from the beginning of Zionism up to 1948, is phenomenal. And I didn't listen to any of it and then just criticize him for that, and then we should all look into it. Look, his series on the creation of the State of Israel, it's basically from the beginning of Zionism up to 1948, is phenomenal. And I didn't listen to any of it and then just take it as fact. It's a topic that I've read a decent amount about, and the things that he added, I went and checked all of them, or his beliefs.
You know what I would like? I mean,
I'm not arguing that.
Okay, it's a shame to me. We invited Daryl Cooper to come on uncensored, and he very respectfully, politely declined it. And that turns out he's doing your show instead, Dave, which is obviously...
Crazy how that works, huh? Wow. Declined Piers Morgan and decides to go on the Dick Suck podcast instead. Crazy how that works, huh?
Come on uncensored, and he very respectfully, politely declined it. And that turns out he's doing your show instead, Dave, which is obviously...
He got a better offer.
Which is obviously particularly aggravating.
You got a better offer? What does that mean? Are you paying him to go on your show? What did that mean? Or does he mean that he would just rather do your show than Piers?
I'm not arguing that.
Okay, it's a shame to me. We invited Daryl Cooper to come on uncensored, And he very respectfully, politely declined it. And that turns out he's doing your show instead, Dave, which is obviously...
He got a better offer.
Which is obviously particularly aggravating. But actually, the real debate I'd like to see, no offense to any of us three, but Daryl Cooper at the same time as Andrew, to actually debate the reality of what happened in World War II, that is something I'd really want to see. And would be very happy to host. Because I do think if you're going to make really quite dramatic claims, completely changing a narrative about something as consequential and historically important as World War II, as Daryl Cooper's done, you've got to have someone who's literally immersed decades of research into it to be there to counter what you're saying. Seth?
But if Tucker likes this guy and wants to talk to him, then he has every right to give him a platform and have a discussion with him, and he can be as agreeable as he wants. That is free speech, being able to say things, and everybody has a right to be wrong. You can say things without any evidence supporting them whatsoever. It's your opinion. You can even claim that it's fact and it's not your opinion, and you could be wrong about it. You have a right to do that, and then the responsibility is on everybody else too. If it is false or it is damaging, it is dangerous, destructive, whatever, you respond to it, you refute it, you ridicule it, you give your own speech, add more speech to it. I really resist, the idea that there should be filtering that happens about which voices we allow to enter the public square. I think everybody should be allowed to have their voice in the public square. We should welcome conversations like this. I do think Tucker should have pushed back on him more. Personally, I think he does agree with his views, and that's why he didn't. But it's a conversation for everybody else to have. To denigrate the people who are actually responding and suggest that they're trying to shut down the conversation when they're literally taking part in it is also something I think
that's a really interesting point, actually. And Dave Smith, I mean, would you agree with that? Because it seems to me what we're doing now is all part of the free speech process, right? Is that Tucker has this pretty controversial interview with a guy saying very controversial things. We're now getting top historians and top commentators like yourselves to come and debate this and talk about it and thrash it all out. What I'm pleased about is that actually young people who tend to watch these shows, they're getting probably educated a lot more about World War II than they would have any knowledge of to start with. That's a good thing. And you should, of course, challenge history. Of course you should. Everything should be challenged. But it is slightly dangerous when people start as their starting point with a statement that says Churchill's worse than Hitler. And I think that is where, free speech gives him the right to say it. But it's a pretty damaging thing to fly around cyberspace in perpetuity to a lot of impressionable young minds, isn't it?
Well, okay, again, I don't think that's exactly the statement that he made, but I do completely agree that I believe in free speech. I think that there should be much more speech on a lot of different topics that matter, and nothing really matters more than World War II. It was one of the most important and, of course, also awful events.
I believe in free speech is a thing that, like, it's like what a 4-year-old says. Like, I believe in free speech is like when like a 50-year-old is fucking a 12-year-old saying that, like, love knows no bounds. It is such a meaningless, stupid fucking statement. Like, we're not talking about free speech here. We're talking about the consequences of spreading misinformation. No one here is talking about making a law criminalizing some speech. No one here is talking about firing someone or destroying their life. Literally no one is talking about that right now. Like, this is like the most level 1, like, retarded rejection of an argument that anybody could ever say. Like you're in college and you're in class and some professor's trying to explain something and he's like, there are people in the back talking constantly. He's like, hey, can you guys either leave or be quiet so other people can hear? And they're like, well, actually, professor, we believe in a little thing called freedom of speech. Actually, this is America. I believe in a little thing called freedom of speech, okay? Actually, so I'm challenging through the Supreme Court, actually. So I like to just scream randomly at 2 a.m. in my apartment complex, and my neighbors knocked on my door, and they said, hey, can you stop screaming like a fucking banshee? And you know what I told them? I said, actually, I think we need more screaming in this apartment complex. I think we need more free speech, not less freedom of speech. I'll see you in the Supreme Court, okay?
The time has come.
On a lot of different topics that matter, and nothing really matters more than World War II. It was one of the most important and, of course, also awful events in human history. And so I couldn't agree with that more. I think that if Daryl has a controversial opinion and somebody thinks he's getting it right, I think he should give his opinion. Other people should call him out. I would love to see a back and forth. I'd love to see that debate that you were talking about, Piers.
Really? Oh, so you're going to bring somebody on your show to debate him? Or you're going to give him substantive pushback then? Or you're going to encourage him to debate somebody? Do you think he'll do any of those 3 things on his show?
I think all of it is healthy and good, and I do think that undeniably, and part of this is for good reason, but undeniably, World War II has an energy around it that really just no other historical event has. I mean, if you could, if I could sit here and say, as I did earlier, that the U.S. never should have entered World War I, this is not going to generate a lot of controversy. There won't be a week worth of people flipping out over me saying, if I said Vietnam or Korea or the war in Iraq or any of that, you don't get any of this. But when you talk about World War II, you do get this kind of energy. Like, it is kind of a third rail, and I don't think it should be. I think that we should have these conversations. There have been a lot of people.
First of all, you get a lot of strong feelings around Vietnam and Iraq. The only reason they come up around World War II is because nobody actually knows anything or gives a fuck about anything relating to World War II. People are just obsessed with trying to rewrite the Holocaust and Hitler, like you and your fucking some friends. Like, that's the reason why it draws so much attention. So everybody that tries to dive into it, it's like, well, let me tell you today, here's my 787th conspiracy about World War II. Did you know that there is no actual recording of Hitler giving an order to Holocaust Jews? You know that that's actually not written down anywhere? Kind of weird, isn't it? Isn't that kind of weird? Isn't that kind of strange? Right? Oh, you're going to talk about the Holocaust? Well, let me tell you about the bombing of Dresden. You ever heard about this before? You know anything about that?
people over the years. Of course, Pat Buchanan famously wrote the book Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. By the way, The Unnecessary War, I believe, was a Winston Churchill quote. Ironically, I think Winston Churchill's comments after the war are closer in some ways than at least in the middle of this.
Do you think I don't know anything about his comments after the war? When if I were to go and look these up, when Winston Churchill is talking about an unnecessary war, do you think Winston Churchill is implying that the United States and Great Britain entered for absolutely no fucking reason, or that the conditions that brought about World War II maybe could have been avoided, you know, with some greater world collaboration? What is this, like a speech, or I don't even know what the fuck he's referring to? Winston Churchill, war that could have been avoided, World War II.
In position.
Churchill and the avoidable war.
My bow is ready. Will this ever end?
Point the way.
I hate that I'm living in quotes right now because I don't have all the background, but this book that he's quoting, Churchill and the Avoidable War, at least the review of it, is saying, now maybe this doesn't accurately summarize all the underlying material, but Churchill maintained that it was all avoidable. Quote, if the Allies had resisted Hitler strongly in his early stages, he would have been forced to recoil, end quote. That kind of sounds like the exact opposite of whatever the fuck he's implying. That sounds like there should have been more violence early on to stop Hitler. But I don't know, like I said, I don't have the background for it, but who the fuck knows? I know he hasn't read this fucking book, because I don't think he's ever read a single book in his life, because I don't even know if this fucking retard can read.
This debate between, you know, where you guys are. So I'm all for that. More speech always, on every single issue, more speech, not less.
Let me give the final word to Andrew, our eminent historian, because there's been, I think, quite an insidious little campaign in recent years to denigrate the reputation of Winston Churchill. Yes, he wins the Greatest British Awards and so on in the polls, and I certainly believe he deserves that. How insidious do you think it is? Does it matter? Should we be raining back at it?
I think that, yes, it is insidious, yes, it does matter, but history is an argument without end, and you know, it's what keeps people like me in business. But the true, sort of, most powerful irony of all of this is that if Adolf Hitler won the Second World War and Winston Churchill hadn't, we wouldn't be having this argument. There would be no free speech. All of freedom of expression ultimately comes down to the fact that he was willing not to make peace with Hitler, but instead to extirpate Nazism.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you. What a fascinating debate. Thank you to Seth, thank you to Dave, thank you to Andrew. Really appreciate it. Let's try and get the Roberts-Cooper showdown sorted. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah,
Quickly.
Woke, which seems to be a synonym, I think, for
anything you don't like.
Politically correct, or a way of describing people who you feel strain too hard to be right on and to be fans of equality. You see them, I think you see them, and it's never quite clear how far into your cheek your tongue is when you're talking about things like vegan sausage rolls, but you do see them as a genuine threat. I wonder what they're a threat to.
It's a threat to freedom of speech, because I think that there's a...
You're calling for them to be quiet.
Well, look, first of all, by the original definition of woke,
yes,
I would happily sign up to being woke. If woke means just being aware of social and racial injustice, then I'm woke. That's not a problem. But that's not what the modern version of woke has become. It's become a very destructive, quite self-harming sort of feeding frenzy based around this cancel culture. And I know you don't really buy into that, but I see it all the time where people are getting more and more cowed about feeling they just can't express an opinion or have a haircut or wear certain culturally inappropriate outfits or, you know, laugh at a certain...
But are they really?
Whatever it may be. I feel it's self-harming. I don't feel that taking things to that degree brings anybody with you. And if you want to win an argument, you've got to bring people with you.
But the argument for me, and trans is an exception to this observation, because I think that trans issues are very confusing and people scream at each other with a fury of certainty that I can't achieve that, anything like that level.
Do you think that applies to everything?
No, I really don't. I think trans is very much the exception, and in fact it's people who are possessed of really toxic and dangerous views regarding race or religion or ethnicity or sexuality. I think they're desperate for trans to be front and centre, because then they can claim there's a culture war, but actually a lot of your arguments work in the context of trans. They don't work in the context of racism or religious bigotry.
Well, they do if you start making a mockery.
Well, that's what I'm going to do. Yes, but that's what I don't get, because all I know of these great battles are what I'm told by media outlets that are literally primed to infuriate and enrage me. And
I followed you on that. And what I would say to you is, you think that they're sort of conflated, they're concocted, they're created by the media, but it wasn't the media that said, for example, that Rule Britannia should be chopped from the France. It was actually the capitalists, not the media. It got brought to the media's attention, and the media then had a lot of, you know, hey, while the sun shone. But I do think it's chicken and the egg, isn't it? There's always something there that starts it.
Okay, so name 3 people who, in the public eye who passionately believe that we shouldn't have sung Land of Hope and Glory at them. And remember, it's an audience sing-along at an event with no audience.
No, sure. It doesn't need to be 3. It just needs to be the person in charge of the production.
Well, no, you're talking about an army of wokies, and I can't think of one person who passionately believes it shouldn't happen.
The person had the power to decide it wasn't going to be a big part of the proms, and then that became the power.
But there was no audience, Piers.
Here's the point I would make to you.
An audience sing-along at an event with no audience.
Then bring somebody in and sing it. You can do that. I would definitely not.
I can't name anyone who was passionately opposed to it.
Yes, I remember her name, the woman who was in charge of the proms. That was the point. Right. And look, you might think it's trivial, but I can tell you, the moment people heard that a quite woke person in charge of the proms had decided we weren't going to be able to sing Ball Britannia, all hell broke loose. But more importantly,
of course it did. That's what I mean.
More importantly for the left and for the wokeness, what did it actually achieve? In the end, they do a U-turn, as everybody knew they would. So they don't win. They just have a completely futile war, which is guaranteed to ensure they don't get what they want to get. When was the woke candidate in an election who won? Anything.
I'm still not entirely sure what you mean by woke, and we can hopefully we can use myself as an example on this. But for me, the fact that there was no audience there simply meant that they were changing the way that the event unfolded. The Times, I think, or the Sunday Times got hold of it, turned it into a story. The number of stories you see now about Black Lives Matter are responsible for this review. There's no such thing. Can you name someone who is what you could call a member of Black Lives Matter? And yet every story I read about Nelson being reassessed or statues being protected, I just don't know who these people are. And I sit in newsrooms, and I'm sure you still do too. And I hear people desperately ringing around to try to find someone to represent what you describe as an army. If there's so many of them, why are they so hard to find?
I don't think you need to find anybody. When you have to board up Winston Churchill, Gandhi and Mandela statues in Parliament Square.
But they did that during the Countryside Alliance March.
I'm not, listen, the right wing can behave far worse than the left wing.
They're right wing, they're just country people. They're just pointing out that there's a big event. They probably boarded up those statues when you were having your big anti-Iraq war march.
Yes, listen, I'm not saying that everyone's not culpable. I'm not saying I'm not culpable or part of this frenzy and noise. But what I am saying is the illiberal liberal element of wokedom has got completely out of hand. You might not accept it, but go out and ask people, are you sick and tired of this stuff? And they'll tell you they are.
Well, of course they will, because so much effort, it's like Brexit, so much effort has been put into telling people that there's an enemy at the gate. No one's bothered to check whether there actually is. So, off the top of your head, who has been cancelled in the United Kingdom?
What do you mean, who's been cancelled?
Well, it's a word you use a lot. You say that James O'Brien...
The time has come.
That's always a bid for time. When somebody... Whenever somebody does that, when they repeat it's always like, fuck. They're like desperately searching because they know they're supposed to have an answer to this and they don't.
Top of your head, who has been cancelled in the United Kingdom?
What do you mean, who's been cancelled?
Well, it's a word you use a lot. You say that James O'Brien won't be cancelled because he's got such a big platform.
Well, you have. You're not going to get cancelled. Well, what about the name of the author who got cancelled by...
You'll have to do better than that, because you say James O'Brien will not be cancelled, but I know loads of people who have been, so just name a few.
Okay, but I can think of one immediately, which is a good example. And actually, you ought to be furious about it. It was the author. I don't know her name.
It's hardly a massive issue. You can't even remember her name.
Oh, no.
You ought to be furious about it. It was the author. I don't know her name.
It's hardly a massive issue if you can't even remember her name.
Massive.
It's a massive issue.
Okay. So the author whose name you can't remember, what did she do?
Her publisher, because the woke staff of the publisher. And I can do a myriad examples in the book.
But this will be trans, won't it? It won't be any other issue.
It will be trans.
Yes, because that's the only thing that works.
Because you happen to agree with it.
I don't have a view on trans. I write in my new book about how I can't pick a side.
As I say in the book, you do have a view on trans, and the moment you express your view on trans, they try to cancel you.
No, and let me explain why you got that horribly wrong, if I may. So well, what I tweeted, as you, and I'm very flattered that there's so many pages.
About you.
You're always very nice. But I mean, two things I pick up first. James O'Brien, who popular at social radio today, so that's fairly uncontroversial. It never crosses O'Brien's mind that he might not be right, or that anyone who disagrees with him might not automatically be a vile bigot. How to be right, which I don't think you've read, is the polar opposite of that on every page.
I know what you claim to be.
No, it's my book that you've mentioned. I'll tell you what's in it.
There's no relation to any of that.
I'll tell you what's in my book.
You can be very self-righteous. You
say that according to Twitter, but my book is about how easy it is to persuade good, decent, non-bigoted, intelligent, fully functioning people of things that aren't true. And then I go through 10 different issues, everything from Winterval, which was a myth, right through to the controls we did and didn't have over immigration, to the meaning of political correctness. And on every single page, or certainly after every single transcript, I say, this is a good person, this is not a stupid person. And yet, under your reading, everyone who disagrees with me must automatically be a vile bigot.
Nobody could read your Twitter feed without drawing the hourly conclusion that you think anybody that voted Brexit, it must be a total moron.
No, that's simply not true. Otherwise, my best friend voted Brexit, my father-in-law voted Brexit. This is where I'm wasting my breath, because you're saying things that are simply not true to support your thesis. So let's park that and move on to this example that you used.
Again, you think you're right, and you must countenance.
No, I think I'm right about who I am, Piers, and what I wrote in my book.
Who you are, the same way you're questioning who I am.
Okay, well, I'm right about what's in my book that I wrote and that you haven't read.
But on the transgender thing,
why would you even put it in there if you haven't read it?
Before you move on so fast on the transgender thing, explain.
I'm not moving on. I'm coming right to it now. That's absolutely where we are. So what I was under scrutiny or criticism from people who would be described perhaps as anti-trans or TERFs, and they were asking me, I wish I could ask them what it's like to be a woman. So I explained how confusing I find it all. And there's a chapter on this in my book as well, which would have helped you perhaps understand what I was doing on this occasion. And I said, I don't think it's unreasonable to not let human beings with penises into changing rooms, knowing that the response to that, because we've done it on the radio show, is always, well, who's going to check? And that's the point at which I say, actually, I can simultaneously sustain two contradictory positions here, because A, I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that people with penises shouldn't be allowed into female changing rooms. B, I can't support any form of underpants police or genital examination before you're allowed into a changing room. And my friend Paris Lees, who you cite here as somehow attacking me or turning on me, well, she makes a brilliant point. She says, who's going to check the contents of my pants? So
yeah, fuck, I was going to say the answer to that is, well, we already, nobody checks now, right? You just kind of trust that everybody sorts themselves out accordingly, right?
Instead of thinking, crikey, that's a really good point, you saw it as evidence of wokeness. So first question would be, who is going to check the evidence of her pants?
Well, these are the questions that have to be asked, aren't they?
Quickly. We must act.
What a response.
So first question would be, who is going to check the evidence of her pants?
Well, these are the questions that have to be asked, aren't they?
And I answered them in my new book. You don't in yours. So who should check the contents of her pants?
I don't know is the answer. Right, but what I would say...
But you do think that it's reasonable to suggest that people with penises shouldn't be allowed into female-only spaces?
Listen, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm saying when you say there's no such thing as cancel culture, look at the reaction you got.
And I say to you can't name anyone, and if you can, it will only be about trans, not about all the other issues, from vegan sausage rolls to Black Lives Matter.
The example I was giving you before you so rudely interrupted me, the writer who got cancelled by her publisher because she retweeted a support for J.K. Rowling, who had similar views about the transgender issue, but women's rights are being damaged by the trans rights lobby. And I have a lot of sympathy with a lot of what she says, not all of it, but most of it. And I do think at the very least, somebody as woke as J.K. Rowling should not end up with a hashtag RIP J.K. Rowling. That is the kind of illiberal fascism, which is the very thing that wokies claim that they detest most in genuine fascism.
But you keep saying wokies, and I keep saying this only works on the trans issue. So give me some examples from other areas.
You think it works on the trans issue?
No, I've read your book.
I'll give you an example. Feminists who want James Bond to be a woman.
Right. Why do you care?
Feminists who want James Bond to be a woman.
Right. Why do you care?
I care because James Bond's a man.
Did you see Glenda Jackson's King Lear?
Yes.
What did you think of it?
It's got nothing to do with James Bond.
It's got quite a lot to do with gender. It's got quite a lot to do with gender.
I've got no problem with a woman spy being a hero. And here's another example. Altrincham School for Girls.
Yes.
Told all their staff they could no longer use the word girl. And yet the name of the school remains Altrincham School for Girls. But what about the girls' right to be called a girl at that school, given 99% of the kids there are girls? Google...
How many of them have you asked?
Let me finish. You wanted some examples?
I do, but let's examine them one by one. How many of the girls at Altrincham School for Girls have you asked about how they felt about this?
We had a lot of people...
Because it probably came from the pupils.
Well, hang on. A lot of people from the school contacting us saying it's utterly ridiculous. And what about, they said, why is it that the transgender right, which is just a tiny minority of students... we're able to dictate how everybody got called in the school.
But I'm agreeing with you that when it comes to trans, there is a tension and a confusion and an unresolved animosity between two very, very furiously entrenched camps, but there isn't on anything else, and you've basically written a whole book.
I haven't finished yet.
Oh, sorry.
Google react to radical vegans screaming away by removing the egg from their salad emoji.
So what?
What about my rights as somebody who loves eggs to have the egg in the emoji? Why does a radical vegan get to have it removed when I, like most people in this country, love eggs?
Yes. Have you found your access to eggs in any way limited?
Only when I click on Google. And look,
no, your access to actual eggs rather than cartoon representations of them.
My point is, the radical divisions in all these things, and there are much more serious...
But you can't say the radical divisions of all these things when you've conflated transgender with a cartoon of an egg.
I haven't. I've just told you different examples. You said you're only talking about trans.
Because that's the only thing that works. Nobody is cross about an egg emoji. Nobody's cross about that, and you're not really.
Of course they're cross about it, or it wouldn't have been...
An emoji of an egg?
Of course.
Right.
If people weren't cross about it...
Do you understand why I said I can't tell how much time...
One thing that I've noticed... there's got to be like a formalization of this. There's like a there's a thing, and then there's like a concern about a thing, and then those two things often get conflated. Like, there will be like an object, okay, and then there'll be somebody that like observes the object. Or there'll be an observation of the object. And many times, this thing will be infinitely larger than this thing. This will be massive, and this will be not that big. And then people will refer to this thing, and they'll say, look at how crazy this is, when in reality, they're just referring to this thing. So I feel like what he just brought up as an example of, these are massive issues. And it's like, well, are they really massive issues? Yeah, it's massive. Everybody's talking about it. Well, that doesn't really make it massive, right? The massive thing is just all the people talking about it, right? The thing itself isn't actually massive. People conflate these two things like all the time. And the thing that's irritating about this is intentionally blown up as big as possible because everybody wants to talk about it because it plays into their particular thing. And then this will remain the same size, but as this grows more and more and more, people will talk about how huge of an issue this is. It's very frustrating. I don't know what the, there's got to be there should be a name for this. Somebody make a cute, clever substitution meme.
Time you spend with your tongue in your cheek. I mean, hand on heart. You're really cross that Google removed an egg from their salad.
No, hand on heart on the more serious point.
Yes, as long as it's not trans.
Yes, okay. You can pick any subject you like. Hand on heart, my issue with it all, collectively, is that this kind of nonsense, what it drives is a sense of ongoing, all-encompassing censorship, where companies in particular are now bowing to pressure from the woke brigade to virtue signal their way to a place that I find hellish, where people are being dictated to about every single part of their lives. And most of it is trivial, as you rightly observe, but it's the fact it happens on trivial stuff that A, distracts from the bigger picture, and B, drives people completely nuts and makes them think that they have no ability to have any freedom of speech or expression. And I think...
Just stop talking about it. Things aren't really a big deal, so just stop talking about it, and then people won't feel like they're being distracted or that we're not talking about bigger issues, right?
I think that is legitimately a really serious issue.
But you don't think people should be allowed to say it would be great if James Bond was played by a woman? That's freedom of speech.
Well, if it happens,
why not?
Because James Bond's a man.
Yeah.
This just... Personally, I don't think that James Bond should be cast as a woman. It doesn't seem to be congruent with the character, but James Bond is a fictional character, right? It could be anything. So we have to justify the argument for why it ought to remain male as opposed to being turned female, which I think there are good arguments for, but it can't just be, well, this is what they are. That's not really an argument because it's a fictional character, right?
Played by a woman. That's freedom of speech.
Well, if it happens,
why not?
Because James Bond's a man.
Yeah, a fictional man.
He's a man. He was written as a man.
Real.
He's a man. So you're happy for James Bond to be a woman, right?
Hand on heart, I could not give a fig, mate.
Okay, I disagree.
It's a good. Do you know what I'd do? I'd go to the cinema and decide whether it was a good film or not.
You have things that you care about. I have things I care about.
But this is why I like you so much, because I think you really do care about this, and it is. You must, on some level, realise how ridiculous it is, and that's why I have a problem with your book, because the trans issue is profoundly important, and I write great length and in great detail about it in both the book I published a couple of years ago that you haven't read, and the book that comes out next week. And there's a huge
about your books. If I did, I'd read them.
There's a huge danger of conflating cartoon eggs with young people who feel they've been born into the wrong body.
Because you decided that that's the one issue that matters.
No, you've got a lot of space to list all the great crimes committed by wokies, and you come up with James Bond and a cartoon egg, mate.
Those are the more serious things in the book.
What are the more serious things?
Well, let's talk about...
Why do you can also tell when people are floundering when you're asking for examples. Like, okay, well, that's not even a good one. Okay, fine, that's not even a good one. But there's even worse things. Like, why wouldn't you lead? You know that psychologically we tend to lead with our strongest examples, right?
Though I be damned.
Like this is a heuristic. Okay, I wouldn't apply this and say this is 100% true, but as a heuristic, when somebody comes up to you and they start talking about something, usually you lead with your strongest things. Like, oh, you hate your, like, here's a sentence that could be said, and here's a sentence that will never be said, right? Oh, I fucking hate my husband. Why do you hate your husband? He beats the shit out of me every day. He gets drunk and he beats the shit out of me. And the house is fucking disgusting. He doesn't pull his own weight around the house or anything. And it's just, I hate everything, right? That's a sentence that could be said. Here's a sentence that will never be said, okay? Oh, I hate my husband. Why do you hate your husband? It's just the house is a mess all the time. He doesn't pull his weight around the house. And he beats the shit out of me. Like, that's a joke. The thing that I just said at the end could be a joke because it's a literal misdirection because it's not how you would expect somebody to speak. So it's always funny when you're in a debate or a conversation with somebody, and then after you've gone through some dog shit examples, like, okay, those aren't even the best examples. Wait, then why did you lead with that then? Wait, what do you mean? Why would you even say them? What are you talking about?
Because you decided that that's the one issue that matters.
No, you've got a lot of space to list all the great crimes committed by wokies, and you come up with James Bond and a cartoon egg, mate.
Those are the more serious things in the book.
What are the more serious things?
Well, let's talk about
apart from trans.
Let's talk about racism and the reaction to George Floyd's plea. And the ridiculous way it went away from being a battle for racial equality and racial justice into utter ridiculousness.
I personally don't really like the grayification of reality to suit whatever community gets to claim they're repressed this decade, though you're obviously right about it being overblown. I mean, like, is it kind of cringe? Yeah, but that's about as far as it goes. It is kind of cringe. Also, everybody loves to victimize themselves, my friend. Everybody. It's like part of, like, how many Jewish holidays are about people, like, trying to get killed and then they survive and then they... the candle lasted longer than they thought. They didn't have enough oil and all that bullshit. Like, and or in Catholicism even. Bro, I remember we spent so much time talking about they persecuted us. This woman was so brave. Not only was she brave enough to be martyred, she sat and she watched her 5 children being boiled alive. That's how brave she was. The martyrs of the church. They're so brave as they persecuted us. The Inquisition and everything was so horrible. They killed us. Oh, like everybody. It's like part of everybody's fucking story, bro. I don't know. People like that shit.
Upgrade
about anything that anybody in the world on the woke side decided was racist and had to be cancelled.
For example?
We ended up focusing on Rule Britannia, 40 towers, statues were being destroyed all over America of famous presidents, with the most tenuous links in some cases to slavery. Over here, Winston Churchill being boarded up and Mandela being boarded up.
We're back there again, they always board them up.
Completely crazy because, and the damage is done to the actual cause.
I hear you, I don't buy it, but I think you're sincere. I mean, okay, so final question, can you name any major public figures who think that statues of Winston Churchill should be taken down?
Oh no.
Yes.
Go on.
Did you them on the show?
Who?
Okay.
Oh, he's gonna have one.
Andy Andrews, the professor,
he is the guy that every producer in the country will tell you, and we can't find anybody to pursue this point. That's the person we call. And I did say public figure.
The Winston Churchill statue was defaced. It was
by an idiot student. I sometimes think if you've been to university, you'd realise that idiot students have been around forever, and giving them this level of profile and importance and treating them as if they're a threat to civilization as we know it is their dream come true, Piers.
There are lots of people who think that Winston Churchill is the problem when it comes to the race debate, to which I say, actually, he got rid of the worst ever.
There aren't, though. There might be some dozy undergraduates who've read the wrong books and haven't actually grown up yet, but my attitude would always be, oh, bless them, they'll grow out of it. Yours is, oh my...
Based and true. Kids are fucking retarded. Treat them as retards, okay? You think that? That's so cute. You'll grow out of it. You'll be fine.
My God, they're destroying civilization as we know it, and we must stop them now.
You realise that when I wrote the book,
yes,
people like you were the people I really wanted to read it.
Yes.
Because I knew you'd react like this.
But I'm reacting with great affection and amusement. No, seriously, I promise you, I'm never going to look at a cartoon egg in the same way. I'm not outraged, but just because you use me as an example, I didn't recognise your account, not least because Paris Lees remains a very good friend of mine, and she made an extremely good point about the underpants police. So I couldn't work out whether or not I'm being held up as an example of being woke or a victim of cancel culture.
I think you're an ironic victim of cancel culture, which you don't think exists.
Yes, except on trans issues.
Well, I've given an example where on trans issues, which is the only issue you seem to care about.
No, well, I care about it more than eggs. Forgive me. Cartoon eggs.
Well, you only care about things that you care about. And
nonsense. I care about equality and decency and honesty and integrity and accountability.
Your shtick is to be blindly partisan about an issue.
So isn't.
And by the way, you do it very well.
No, but I don't do that at all.
You will never...
Why do you have to do this? There's lots of things you can criticise me for without making stuff up. You've made up stuff in the book. You don't have to make up stuff here.
Stuff have I made up in the book?
I love being wrong. Well, you said that everybody who doesn't agree with me I consider to be an uneducated bigot, whereas the book you're actually referring to when you say that is full of explanations.
I read your Twitter feed.
Well, my Twitter feed, honestly, mate. Your life's too short.
Permanently.
Do you know what we've done? We're not going to have any time to talk about Trump. So the three areas on my Twitter feed, the three areas upon which you've historically sought to lock horns with me were the utter, the way that Donald Trump's depravity outside the White House would make it absolutely clear to anybody honest how completely dangerous he would be inside the White House, that the Brexit that people voted for was absolutely impossible to deliver, and that Boris Johnson was supremely unfit for office. What did I get wrong?
Well, you're always right about everything. You know?
No, just on those three.
Oh, no.
The utter, on my Twitter feed, the three areas upon which you've historically sought to lock horns with me were the utter, the way that Donald Trump's depravity outside the White House would make it absolutely clear to anybody honest how completely dangerous he would be inside the White House, that the Brexit that people voted for was absolutely impossible to deliver, and that Boris Johnson was supremely unfit for office. What did I get?
Jesus.
The great
Get wrong.
Is there trouble?
Oof.
Well, you're always right about everything. You know?
No, just on those three issues, which are the only things you've ever tweeted me.
The thing you got wrong is that you refused to accept the result of the referendum.
No, I didn't.
What?
That's not what I asked you. I said that the people weren't going to get the Brexit that they voted for. They're not, are they?
Of course not, but
Well, you agree with me?
Of course, you know I agree with you about Brexit.
And Trump?
Trump, as you know, I've known him a long time. I see good and bad in him, and I think he may lose the election for all the bad side of him coming to the fore. But I don't see him as bad as you do, but I don't see him as good as he sees himself.
And Boris Johnson's fitness for office?
Boris Johnson's turned out to be an absolute clinker.
Damn. Well.
Done. Fair enough. I grow anxious to act. Are we being invaded?
We must act.
Hi! Research finished. More lumber.
Quickly.
Our will shall be done.
My blades thirst.
Our will shall be done. In a
Research
sorrow.
finished.
All too easy.
More lumber is required. More lumber is required.
Point the way.
Command
Time
me.
is short, mortal. Is it time?
We must act. Anador, Anador. Though I be
the
damned.
great outdoors.
At last. Anador, Anador. Veronica. My blades thirst.
I grow anxious to act.
The time has come.
I will not be
Gladly.
trifled.
For the truth.
Quickly.
Mission.
Command me.
For the truth.
My blades thirst. We must act. Quickly. The time has come. We must act. My blades thirst. The time has come. Command. Quickly. Quickly. The time has come. Command me. Revenge. We must act. My blades thirst. Quickly. Command me.
For the truth. I'm game.
The time has come. We must act. My blades thirst. My blades thirst.
I'm awake. Where shall I strike? My path
Our will
is
shall
clear.
be done.
Our time is short. At once.
We must act.
Where shall I strike? My strength
Command
is yours.
me.
Be trifled with. Brilliant. I grow anxious to act.
The time has come.
Our time is
sleeper
short. Has awake. I'm awake. I'm awake. My strength is yours.
Time is short, mortal.
I'm awake. I'm awake. Our time is short. Where shall I strike?
Quickly.
I'm awake. I'm awake. Our time is short.
Quickly. My blades thirst. Though I be damned.
Ah, the great outdoors.
Our
The
will
sleeper
shall
has
be done.
awakened.
For the Empress.
The time has
Is
come.
it time?
We must act.
What is nature's call? For the trees.
Command me.
I will not be trifled with.
Where shall I strike?
The time has come.
I grow anxious to act.
My blades thirst.
My strength is yours. Where shall I strike? I'm awake. I'm awake.
Insufficient gold.
We must act.
My strength is yours. Of course.
Command me.
Time is short,
Quickly.
mortal.
Duronica. Anador, Anador.
Research
We
finished.
must act. At last. Your blood is
I will
mine.
not be trifled.
Though I be damned. The time has come. Anador, Anador. At
Is
last.
it time?
Quickly. My
Our
blades
will shall be
thirst.
done.
Our time is short.
Is it time?
Is there trouble?
Our time is short.
I grow anxious.
Command me. The time has come. Duronica.
I will not be trifled with.
My strength is yours.
My blades thirst.
Anudora. I'm awake.
We
I'm
must
awake.
act. Quickly. Command
Our
me.
will shall be done.
Duronica.
Time is short,
Where shall I strike? At once.
The time has come.
Research finished.
We must act.
Is it time?
My strength is
Command
yours.
me. At last. My blades first. Quickly. Quickly. My blades first. Run for your life. We must act.
The great
Your build.
The time has come.
Are we being invaded?
My blades first. Anudor, Anudor.
Our warriors have engaged the
Is
enemy.
it time? In a shop.
The great outdoors.
I will not be trifled with.
At once. Of course. My path
The great outdoors.
Quickly.
I will not
Are we being
be trifled
invaded?
with. Yes.
We must act.
Is it time?
Command me. The time has come.
Our will shall be done. Brilliant.
The time has come.
Short mortal. I grow anxious to act.
Command
The great
me.
outdoors.
Quickly.
Insufficient gold.
I will not
Is
be
there
trifled
trouble?
with. Time is short, mortal. I grow anxious to act.
My blades
Our
first.
will shall be done. Is it time? By your command. For not at all.
We must act.
I will not be trifled with. For not at all. Verasaja.